The doctor's voice resonated in the sterile hospital hallway. "Mrs. Crawford, your mother's condition is critical. We need to operate immediately." I clutched my phone, desperately trying to reach Douglas for the 6th time. When he finally answered, his annoyance was evident. "What is it now, Virginia?" "I'm in an important meeting," he snapped. The familiar icy tone made my stomach churn. Mom's being rushed into emergency surgery. "I need you here," I pleaded, my voice cracking. The fluorescent lights hummed above as I waited for his reply. "Sorry, can't make it. Big things happening." "Just handle it yourself," he said before disconnecting. I'm Virginia Crawford, 47 years old, and that moment in St. Luke's Hospital in Birmingham was when I finally acknowledged that my marriage was irrevocably broken. As nurses wheeled my mother towards the ICU, memories of happier days surfaced. Summer afternoons at our family's Victorian estate, the fragrance of mother's roses drifting through open windows, father's hearty laughter resonating through the grand halls. That estate had belonged to our family for 4 generations. After father's passing 3 years prior, mother and I inherited it jointly. The old house held immense significance for us. Each creaking floorboard, each elaborate molding whispered a chapter of our family history. Douglas used to appreciate that, or so I believed. When we first wed 15 years ago, he'd spend weekends assisting mother in her cherished garden. But over time, my husband's heart had hardened. Sitting in the ICU waiting area, my phone vibrated with a text from Douglas. "Secured my future. Just sold the estate, leaving for Brazil tonight with someone who actually makes me happy. Goodbye." An unexpected calmness washed over me as I processed his words. What Douglas didn't realize was that I had been monitoring his every action for months. My private investigator, Juliana, had kept me informed of his machinations, including his infidelity with his young secretary and their scheme to abscond. I replied with a single word: fascinating. Gazing at my mother's frail form through the ICU window, I felt a steely resolve building within me. Douglas was completely oblivious to what awaited him. Sometimes, the most effective revenge is allowing someone to fall into the trap they've constructed for themselves. Douglas hadn't always been this way. When we met at a charity gala in Birmingham 15 years prior, he was different, kind, driven, and genuinely compassionate. He worked as a junior partner at a law firm then, and his eyes would sparkle when he discussed helping his clients. I recall how he used to bring coffee to my father during lengthy conversations about estate management, eager to learn and comprehend our family's legacy. The Victorian estate had been more than just a residence. Built in 1887 by my great-grandfather, it symbolized our family's heritage. Every Christmas, every celebration, every peaceful Sunday afternoon was spent within its walls. I can still envision my grandmother seated in her preferred corner of the library, recounting tales of generations past. "Family isn't solely about blood, Virginia," she'd say, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "It's about trust and safeguarding what truly matters." The alterations in Douglas were gradual initially. Around 5 years ago, he started spending increased hours at the office, returning home later and later. When my father passed away 3 years ago, something in him fundamentally changed. He began challenging every financial decision I made, demanding greater control over the estate's affairs. I observed small items disappearing from the house, antique pieces, family heirlooms, which he claimed were simply being appraised. 2 months ago, I discovered receipts for a luxurious apartment in Rio de Janeiro within his emails. That's when I engaged Juliana. "Your husband has been meeting with various prospective buyers," she reported last week. "He's been presenting them with forged documents, asserting full ownership of the estate. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so agonizing." Douglas had spent years striving to seize control of the estate, unaware that my grandmother had placed it in an irrevocable trust long before he entered our lives. She had witnessed comparable scenarios unfold in other affluent families and had taken measures to protect our legacy. My phone buzzed again with another message from Douglas. "You'll thank me when you see how much I got for that old house. Time to move on." I put my phone away, my hand finding solace in the worn leather of my grandmother's diary in my purse. Inside lay the truth that would soon demolish Douglas's plans. The ICU waiting room grew colder as night descended. My mother's operation was exceeding the anticipated duration, and my anxiety intensified. Then Juliana called with information that chilled me to the bone. "Virginia, I have something you need to see immediately," she said, her voice strained with urgency. "Can you check your email?" I opened the attachment she'd sent, and my hands trembled. There were numerous photographs. Douglas at lavish restaurants with his young secretary, Angela, shopping for extravagant jewelry, boarding a private jet, jewelry at Tiffany's, and visiting high-end real estate offices. But what truly turned my stomach were the documents clearly visible in several photographs. "He's been systematically draining your personal accounts for months," Juliana revealed. "The estate sale is just the final act. He's already moved most of your liquid assets to offshore accounts." I accessed my banking app, and as expected, my personal account displayed a meager balance of $840. The joint account we shared was utterly depleted. Tears welled up as I grasped the extent of his deception, plotted for months, perhaps even years. My phone buzzed with another text from Douglas. "By the way, I took care of those dusty old photo albums in the library. Nobody needs that sentimental junk anymore. The buyers want the house empty by next week." The photo albums, my mother's cherished memories, generations of our family history. The thought made me physically ill. The estate's security camera feed appeared on my phone, showing Douglas and Angela loading boxes into his car. They were laughing, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating in our family home while my mother battled for her life in surgery. "Virginia," Juliana's voice pulled me back. "There's more. He's booked 2 first-class tickets to Rio de Janeiro for tonight, and he's been recording your phone calls with the hospital. He wanted to ensure your mother was too incapacitated to interfere with the sale." The full impact of his treachery hit me. He hadn't merely been stealing our money. He'd been waiting for my mother to be at her weakest. He'd orchestrated everything perfectly, assuming I'd be too consumed with my mother's condition to notice his actions. Just then, the doctor emerged. "Mrs. Crawford, your mother is stable. The surgery was successful, but she'll require extensive care during recovery." I gripped my grandmother's diary tighter, feeling the concealed documents within that would be Douglas's undoing. He believed he had planned flawlessly, but he was completely unaware of what was coming. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't simply about victory. It's about letting your enemy self-destruct. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Virginia Crawford. I understand you're the buyer Douglas arranged for our estate." My voice remained steady, concealing the fury within. Yes, Mrs. Crawford. Your husband mentioned you'd be calling to finalize the details. I must say, $3.2 million is a steal for such a magnificent property." He sounded self-satisfied. "And you've already transferred the funds?" I inquired, glancing at my mother's peaceful sleeping face. "Yes, just this morning. Your husband was quite insistent on immediate payment. Mentioned something about an investment opportunity in Brazil that couldn't wait." I smiled grimly. "Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you contact your bank immediately and halt that transfer. You see, Douglas doesn't actually possess the authority to sell the estate." There was a prolonged silence. "I'm sorry, what?" "The property is held in an irrevocable trust. Any sale without proper documentation from the trust administrator is fraudulent." I heard him inhale sharply. "I believe that would make you an unwitting accomplice in real estate fraud." While Mr. Reynolds absorbed this information, my phone buzzed with another text from Douglas. "Just dropped off the final paperwork with the buyers. You should be grateful I got us a great deal. Heading to the airport now with my real future." I redirected my attention to Mr. Reynolds, who was now stammering about legal documentation. "Check your purchase agreement carefully," I advised. "I'm certain you'll find some discrepancies. My husband can be quite creative with paperwork when it benefits him." Just then, Juliana entered the hospital room, nodding to confirm that everything was in place. She handed me a folder containing copies of the trust documents and recent bank statements detailing Douglas's systematic theft. "Mrs. Crawford," Mr. Reynolds's voice was now edged with panic. "I've just reviewed the documentation. These signatures, they don't match the county records." "No, they wouldn't," I responded calmly. "I suggest you contact your lawyer immediately. The FBI is already involved, and they'll want to speak with you regarding your involvement in this transaction." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Agent Sarah Martinez who had been building a case against Douglas for the past month. "We're in position at the airport," she reported. "Your husband just checked in for his flight to Rio with a woman matching Angela's description." "Perfect timing," I said, watching Juliana set up her laptop to monitor the security feeds. "He has no idea the trust administrator is waiting at the gate." The next text from Douglas made me shake my head. "Boarding soon. You'll never find us where we're going. Enjoy your empty life in that worthless old house." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my grandmother's diary and retrieved the document that would seal Douglas's fate. The original trust agreement, with its unambiguous provisions regarding property transfer and fraud prevention. Juliana looked up from her laptop with a satisfied smile. "Airport security just flagged their passports. Want to watch the show?" Juliana's laptop displayed the airport security feed as Douglas and Angela approached the international terminal. They appeared confident, almost arrogant, pulling their expensive matching luggage. I noticed Angela wearing my mother's sapphire necklace, a family heirloom passed down through generations. "Mrs. Crawford," Agent Martinez's voice crackled through my phone. "We've uncovered something disturbing. Your husband didn't just forge documents for the estate sale. He's been operating a complex scheme involving multiple properties and elderly victims." My hand tightened around the hospital bed rail as she continued. "We've identified at least 6 other cases where he targeted wealthy families during medical emergencies. He would forge power of attorney documents while they were hospitalized." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. All those late nights at the office, the mysterious client meetings, he'd been honing his scheme for years. I thought of the other families, other homes, other lives he'd attempted to ruin. "There's more," Juliana interjected, her gaze fixed on her screen. "I've traced the money trail. Angela isn't just his mistress. She's been his accomplice from the start. She works for a shell corporation that's been laundering money from these property scams." On the security feed, I watched Douglas approach the gate. He was wearing the custom-made suit I'd given him for our anniversary last year, likely the last gift I'd ever given him. Angela clung to his arm, giggling at something he'd said. Then, everything happened at once. 2 FBI agents in suits approached from one direction. The trust administrator, Mr. Harrison, emerged from the other side, flanked by airport security. Douglas's expression morphed from confusion to shock to rage in a matter of seconds. "You don't understand," his voice came through Juliana's audio feed. "My wife gave me permission to sell the property. I have documentation." "Forged documentation," Mr. Harrison countered. "The Crawford estate has been held in an irrevocable trust for over 20 years. Even if your wife wanted to, she couldn't authorize its sale." I observed Douglas's face pale as the realization of his error dawned on him. But instead of surrendering, he shoved Angela towards the agents and ran. He made it about 10 steps before security tackled him, sending my mother's antique bracelet, which I hadn't even noticed was missing, skittering across the airport floor. "Virginia," Juliana's voice was urgent. "Douglas just attempted to transfer another $500,000 from your mother's account. If I hadn't frozen it yesterday—" My phone buzzed with one final text from Douglas. "You think you're so clever. Check your mother's medical insurance." Oops. My blood ran cold. I immediately contacted the hospital billing department. Sure enough, Douglas had canceled my mother's insurance policy the previous week, claiming it was a cost-cutting measure. The surgery she'd just undergone would cost tens of thousands of dollars. He'd planned it all. Get my mother hospitalized without insurance, drain our accounts, sell the estate, and vanish with the money while I drowned in medical debt. What he hadn't anticipated was that I'd already transferred my mother to my own insurance policy 3 months prior, when Juliana first uncovered his scheme. Sometimes, the most effective trap is the one your enemy never sees coming. As I watched Douglas being handcuffed on Juliana's laptop screen, Agent Martinez rushed into my mother's hospital room, her expression grim. "Mrs. Crawford, we need to act quickly. Your husband's phone records indicate he contacted a demolition company yesterday. They're scheduled to commence work on the estate tomorrow morning. Something about the buyer wanting to clear the land immediately." My heart sank. The estate didn't just hold our family memories. It contained evidence of Douglas's other crimes. I'd discovered a hidden safe in his study the previous week, but hadn't managed to open it yet. "He's trying to destroy the evidence. Juliana stated, already dialing her phone. And I wager that safe in his study holds documents from his other victims. There's another problem, Agent Martinez added. Angela's disappeared. She slipped away during the commotion of Douglas's arrest, and she has access to all your banking information. I retrieved my grandmother's diary and extracted a small key hidden within its spine. My grandmother didn't just establish the trust, I explained. She installed a state-of-the-art security system throughout the estate. Every room is monitored, every document protected. Angela won't be able to access anything without triggering silent alarms. Right then, Juliana's laptop pinged with an alert. The estate's security cameras revealed Angela climbing through a window into Douglas's study. She was making a beeline for the safe. Should we dispatch officers? Agent Martinez asked, already reaching for her radio. Wait, I said, watching Angela input the safe's combination. My grandmother also installed a fail-safe. Any unauthorized access to the safe? On screen, Angela swung open the safe door triumphantly. Immediately, both the safe and study doors locked automatically, trapping her inside. A fine mist sprayed from concealed vents, harmless, but containing an invisible UV dye that would mark anyone within the room for weeks. The police can take their time, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. She's not going anywhere, and now she's marked with evidence of attempted theft. My phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds, the prospective buyer. Mrs. Crawford, I've just discovered that Douglas intended to demolish the estate and construct luxury condominiums. He presented me with falsified environmental surveys claiming the historic house was structurally unsound. I've already contacted my bank to halt all payments. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Though you should be aware, the demolition company he hired, it's another shell corporation. They would have taken your money and vanished. Agent Martinez concluded a call and turned to me. The FBI just located Douglas's laptop. He has detailed files on wealthy families with elderly or ailing relatives across 3 states. He was planning to expand his operation significantly. I looked at my mother, still sleeping peacefully, then back at the security feed showing Angela pounding furiously on the study door. My grandmother always said that greed ultimately destroys itself. I don't think Douglas ever understood that the true value of our estate wasn't in its price tag. It was in the safeguards she'd built into every brick. Juliana's laptop pinged again. Virginia, she said urgently, you need to see this. Douglas had one more plan in motion and it's already begun. Juliana turned her laptop to show me what appeared to be transfer confirmations. Douglas set up automatic withdrawals from your mother's retirement accounts, scheduled to trigger at midnight. He's attempting to empty everything before the banks freeze his assets. I smiled, recalling the day 3 months prior when I'd visited my grandmother's old friend at the trust company. Let him try, I said, pulling up my own phone's banking app. I've already moved everything into new accounts protected by the trust. He's about to transfer money from empty accounts and implicate himself in even more fraudulent activities. On the security feed, we watched as police officers entered the study where Angela was trapped. She was still frantically trying to destroy documents from the safe, but her hands now glowed bright purple under the UV lights. Mrs. Crawford, Agent Martinez said, reviewing the documents they'd found. This evidence isn't just about your estate. Douglas's files detail a scheme targeting dozens of families. We're looking at multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. My mother stirred in her hospital bed, her eyes fluttering open. I squeezed her hand gently. Everything's okay, Mom. The estate is safe. Grandmother's plan worked perfectly. Of course it did, she whispered with a weak smile. Your grandmother always said the best trap is the one they walk into themselves. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed. They found Douglas's go bag in his car trunk. It contained passports, currency, and your grandmother's original will. He thought he had the only copy. I opened my grandmother's diary one last time and removed the real original will, safely preserved all these years. No, I said. He only had what we wanted him to find. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse observing Douglas and Angela at their arraignment. Gone were their designer clothes and arrogant smiles, replaced by prison jumpsuits and defeated expressions. The prosecutor read out 37 charges of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. Your Honor, Douglas's lawyer began, my client was simply trying to protect his wife's assets. That's not what the evidence indicates, the prosecutor interrupted, holding up a thick folder. We have documented proof of Mr. Crawford targeting multiple families during medical emergencies, attempting to steal their properties through elaborate fraud schemes. The UV-marked documents recovered from his safe detail every crime. I thought about the other victims, 12 families who had nearly lost everything to Douglas's schemes. Thanks to the evidence we'd gathered, they would all receive justice. The judge set bail at $5 million each, remanding both Douglas and Angela to custody when they couldn't pay. As they were led away, Douglas turned to glare at me. I simply smiled and patted my grandmother's diary. He never understood that true wealth isn't about money. It's about family, legacy, and protecting what truly matters. Back at the estate, my mother was recovering well in her old room, surrounded by the family photos and heirlooms we'd protected. The garden she loved was blooming again, and the house felt more alive than ever. I sat in my grandmother's favorite chair in the library, feeling her wisdom surround me. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the fight. It's in preserving what truly matters while letting greed consume itself.